Statistics yesterday which painted a grim picture. The new stats show that South Africa remains a violent country. But do the men and women in blue contribute to the crime stats? Well, according to Viewfinder, IPID's database of 47,000 complaints against the police, including details pertaining to more than 3,000 killings, a new police accountability tracker dashboard, which houses this data, allows anyone in South Africa to home in on their police station and to gauge what contribution officers there have made to the caseload and body count. The data reveals the extent to which police officers implicated in violent crimes in South Africa escape accountability. Viewfinder's prior investigations have shown that this is often due to inaction from SAPS discipline officials who exploit the loopholes within police discipline regulations to undermine watchdog findings and protect their colleagues from consequences for their actions. Viewfinder is an accountability journalism project in South Africa that does long-term investigations into abuses of power which impact on the public interest. We're now joined by Viewfinder Editor Daneel Knoetze. Very good evening to you, Mr. Daneel. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good evening. Thank you again for having me.
Before we get deeper into this conversation, first of all, I want us to reflect on the crime statistics that were released by Police Minister Bheki Cele yesterday, and they paint a very, very grim picture, and they leave South Africans with little confidence in the police and their ability to curb crime. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to acknowledge about the violence in our society as represented in these crime statistics is that the police service itself is under a huge amount of strain, stress, and danger to themselves. The police are tasked as being our front line against this wave of crime that South Africa experiences. And I think the stresses that is enacted on police officers is often not acknowledged, and the needs and the psychological support that is required for the men and women in blue that have to deal with these crimes daily is a serious area of concern for the police service and for the country. My work is focused, of course, on when that isn't properly done and when police officers end up reacting to these stresses by perpetuating the very types of crimes that they are supposed to be policing, by becoming part of the problem as opposed to standing against it. And I think that is what you've touched upon by highlighting IPID statistics, which shows us that police officers are accused in thousands of assault cases, hundreds of torture cases, many hundreds of killings every year, and also gender-based violence cases, dozens of rapes by police officers on duty every year. I think this is shown us, or this is shown up by a lack of command and control through the ranks of the police service, which is a hierarchical institution, and definitely a lack of discipline management. And that really has been the focus of our investigation this year, to try and understand why, when police officers are implicated in these crimes, that we would expect arrests for civilians to follow. Are police officers not arrested? Are they not disciplined? Are they not suspended? And often in this failure are enabled to become repeat offenders and to be emboldened in that kind of action and response to the stresses of their work, which I do think is often the case in terms of the police perpetrating violent crimes themselves.
Daneel, what are your impressions on the supposed erosion of confidence on the police force and, the law enforcement agencies in South Africa? And in terms of, like a case in point, when one reports a crime and then they are told that, there's no resources, there's no police car to attend to that particular crime. And another case in point, perhaps, when women in particular, victims of gender-based violence report a certain crime that has been perpetrated against them, and then it leaves a lot to be desired on how they are treated at the police station and how that particular crime is handled. So people, lose confidence in how the police and the law enforcement agencies deal with every crime. So what are your impressions on, the supposed erosion of such confidence? Hi, Daneel. All right, we seem to have lost Daneel, but we'll try to reestablish connection with him in a moment. And we'll try, during an interview with the SABC last night, Minister of Police Bheki Cele said his department is under-resourced. Now, let's quickly listen to the clip.
we are under-resourced as the police in the Republic of South Africa. The figures come 2010 and 2010, 2011, 2012. We had 194,000 police in the Republic of South Africa with 50 million South Africans. Today, we have 183 with 60 million South Africans, which means the ratio of police to South Africans has been really affected. So we do need to put a lot of resources. Unfortunately, we could not train last 2 years, and we missed out almost on 14,000 new blood entering the police. We'll have to move faster and bigger in training so that we begin to work on the ratio of police vis-a-vis the South African community, and all provinces will get their share, and we will not have to remove from province A to province B.
All right, that was Police Minister Bheki Cele, in an interview with the SABC last night. And we joined on the line by Daneel Knoetze. He is, a Viewfinder editor. Now, Viewfinder is an accountability journalism project in South Africa that does long-term investigations into abuses of power which impact on public interest. Please do indicate, Daneel, if you are able to hear this clip by Police Minister Bheki Cele and what your, reflections are on this particular clip. And I mean, with the police being under-resourced, are they perhaps contributing, to resources being diverted when they are the accused or being investigated by their fellow members or the investigative police department?
Well, let me touch on 2 points. Before you lost connection, you asked me about trust erosion in the police, and then the minister spoke about the lack of resourcing and the challenges that the police face in that. And those are two intricately linked themes. The police, of course, are under-resourced in this country, and therefore they rely on good information and a wholesome and trusting relationship with the public to enable them to execute their duties properly, to trace suspects, to solve crimes. And if there is an erosion of trust, public trust in the police service, which of course is underwritten by the high levels of abuse as indicated in IPID's data, the police watchdog's data on abuses by the police every year, then the police's job becomes infinitely more difficult. If they cannot rely on the public to work with them and to see them as stakeholders in the community as opposed to a scourge on the community, it really becomes counterproductive to the issue of policing, especially in an under-resourced setting. So my reflection on this would be that the police have a duty to themselves and to the country and to the mandate that they're trying to fulfill to restore public trust. And by that, I think one of the key missing elements within the ranks of the police service today is a lack of consequence management for police officers who either fail in their service delivery mandate or worse, are perpetrators of violent crime and are then seen back on duty within days of being accused of sometimes the most heinous crimes, and leaving a big question mark in the mind of the public and the communities where the police are deployed as to why there seems to be a double standard. So the question of resourcing and the question of public trust is intimately linked, and I think the sooner police management recognize the need for public trust to be restored, to be able to effectively police in an under-resourced setting, the better.
And staying with the issue of public trust, we've seen and heard so many cases of police brutality on civilians and citizens. Yet we haven't, in as much as the Independent Investigative Directorate, has done its job in terms of investigating such crimes. But we've heard little about convictions of such police officers. So I suppose then it compounds further the issue of public trust in the police service.
Absolutely. If you look at the latest IPID statistics, we're looking at in excess of 6,000 cases against the police, of which a vast majority are related to allegations of violent crimes. There's a minuscule, an absolute tiny fraction of those cases result in either criminal or disciplinary accountability. I think the big question for us this year has been around consequence management within the police, because historically we've seen a tendency of police commanders to outsource their due responsibility to ensure that there's discipline and command and control within the ranks to IPID, so they wash their hands often of police officers under their command that are accused in there appears in the public mind, and certainly in terms of the data that's available on this, that there is a double standard at play. If somebody is accused of a heinous violent crime in the public sphere, there's an expectation that they would be arrested, that they would see the full might of the law, and that they would have a chance to defend themselves, certainly, but that justice would take its course. The consequence of a police officer committing such a crime on duty, I think our investigation has shown, is very often minimal and very often not properly followed through in a departmental sense. The police as an employer, as a management that is accountable to the public and is accountable to other employees, I think there's a definite failure there, and I think that Parliament, our investigations, and the policy sector as a whole, including police management itself, who issued a circular calling out the inaction of police commanders in these kinds of cases recently, has recognized. And I think it's something that would be a major point of concern and a major point of intervention and reform that might be needed in the new financial year starting next year.
You know, South Africans' waning levels of public trust in the police is coupled with the high levels of police criminality and, weak oversight and accountability mechanisms. So who bears the onus of, having oversight in terms of the administration of justice on the police officers who've been implicated in criminal activity?
This is a very good question, because you would have police spokespeople on the SABC very regularly deferring questions about abuses, killings, allegedly unlawful killings in some cases by police officers to the IPID, the police watchdog. There is a strain of response within the police service to outsource all queries and all concerns to the purview of the IPID. That's strictly not what police discipline regulations require. And I think it's a misinterpretation of the police's duties that is so often said into the public sphere. What the law and what police discipline regulations require is that the police police management take a proactive approach to serious misconduct against their members. And I think the sooner commanders, who we often see outsourcing their responsibility to watchdog investigators who themselves are under-resourced and unable to cope with the massive case. Here, as I mentioned a moment ago, issued a circular in October calling out this exact issue and calling on police commanders to investigate all alleged misconduct at the police station. And I happen to have tested whether this took hold and whether this has had any effect with a specific case study in Uppington, where a young man was allegedly beaten very severely by a police officer and then subsequently died. And what we found in that specific case study, which came very shortly after the circular was issued, was that supposedly no action was taken against the police officer, that he remained on duty. In fact, I phoned the police station and I spoke to him, and I put the questions to him and his commander as to why he was still on duty, only to be stonewalled and to be hung up on. And it's this kind of lack of communication, lack of transparency,
You know, Daneel, we are really struggling with connection and connectivity issues, and yeah, we are battling to hear you. But I'm afraid that we're going to have to end the interview. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time. That was Daneel Knoetze. He's a Viewfinder editor. Remember that Viewfinder is an accountability journalism project in South Africa that does long-term investigations into police inaction when it comes to the delivery of services and the policing services in South Africa. This is The Globe on SABC News. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment.